meeting to the regular meeting of the Twinsburg Board of Education. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7:01. Mr. Aho, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Crawford?
Here.
Mr. Curtis?
Here.
Mrs. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Felber?
Here.
Mrs. Travis?
Here.
Okay, we're all here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I believe we do have an addendum or change to the agenda. We'll move to, we do have an addendum change for new business J6. Do I have a motion to add an addendum to the agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Davis. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll go with Ms. Travis on that one. Okay, Mr. Ayo, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Travis?
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Felber?
Yes.
Mr. Curtis?
Yes. Okay, that passes 5-0. On to communications and my president's report. Good evening, Twinsburg staff and Twinsburg community. I'm Mark Curtis, and I'm honored to serve as your board president. On May 25th, we celebrated our graduating seniors for the first time in 3 years at E.J. Thomas Hall and on the campus of Akron, University of Akron. Additionally, we were able to recognize those student athletes who were unable to be in attendance by live streaming during the ceremony. Now, although we've been through so much, one thing that has been beneficial is the seamless integration of technology in all that we do nowadays. So for that reason, I'd like to thank Mr. Casey Kirtley, Mr. Chad Welker, and Mr. Brian Fantone, as well as our superintendent, for doing so much to pull this off. It was truly special and made the evening unforgettable. As we celebrated our graduates, I was recently informed of achievements of two recent graduates from last year. Mr. Benjamin Wales McGrath, he graduated summa cum laude with chemistry department honors as well as Phi Beta Kappa membership, and also Jameson Payne, who also graduated with a double major in political science and physics from Kent State University. They both were participants in our College Credit Plus program and have managed to complete their undergraduate degree requirements early. Congratulations to both of them, and we're looking forward to what else awaits them. Finally, I hope that everyone was able to enjoy a restful Memorial Day weekend. And although it's an extended weekend, we pause to recognize all of those who made the ultimate sacrifice, making it possible for all of us to enjoy the freedoms that we have today. That ends my president's report. I will now turn the meeting over to Mrs. Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Good evening, Board of Education. Good evening, everyone who is watching from home. You can tell it's summer break, or is anybody in the audience? But I'm sure they're watching with bated breath on live stream. We want to begin by just saying congratulations to all of our students from preschool all the way to the continuum to grade 12. You know, it was a fantastic year. We want to thank our parents for their support. And of course, we want to thank our staff who do great things every single day to support our students and who are continuing to do that even over the summer months. So thank you to one and all for a great year. We truly do appreciate the partnership that we have with our families. Mr. Curtis mentioned our class of 2022. Just a few statistics. I always find this interesting. We had 328 students graduate in the class of 22. 66 seniors graduated with summa cum laude, 46 seniors with magna cum laude, and 27 seniors with cum laude. 89 academic honors diplomas. That's fantastic. 1 arts honors diploma, 1 social science and civic engagement diploma, and 1 STEM honors diploma. So our students really accelerated and excelled in the class of 22. We're really proud of every single one of them, and congratulations to all. Speaking of congratulations, you know, this time of the year we work on our senior send-off newsletter. Before I came to the board meeting this evening, I was working on an edit of that newsletter, It's going to be up to the high school now to finalize, just making sure the names and the awards are correct. And then once that's finished, off to the printer. Each senior graduate will receive a copy of the senior send-off in the mail. And this year, we will be also mailing a copy to all of our homes in our school community. We're having some issues with the distribution of the Twinsburg Bulletin to everybody's home, and we just want to make sure that everybody gets a copy of it, so we will be mailing that through the U.S. mail in the next week or so. Super excited, great photos, lots of wonderful memories of the class of 2022. Also, we want to thank Mr. Lynn, our high school principal. He did a fantastic job in his first year as principal at Twinsburg High School. Lots of details when you think about commencement, and returning to E.J. Thomas Hall was just great fun. It was a great place for the celebration. We also want to thank Mrs. Donna Houston, our graduation advisor, and our senior class advisor, Ms. Brittany Hartery, as well as our school guidance department under the leadership of Mrs. Tanya Gregor, and of course all of the staff at Twinsburg High School. Also, we want to thank the Twinsburg Ministerial Association, and it's under the leadership of Father Michael Stalla from Saints Cosmas and Damian Church. You know, the whole week of graduation began with baccalaureate at St. Cosmas and Damian. It's just a nice time for a reflection and a moment of gratitude before all the festivities begin. So thank you to Father Michael and to the other ministers who supported our students that evening. A reminder that kindergarten screening and registration is underway for the class of 2035. Parents of children who will be 5 years of age before August 1st of 2022 are asked to visit the district website and then click on the For Parents tab, scroll down to registration information, and there you will receive lots of directions for how you can begin to pre-register your young one for kindergarten. As always, if you have any questions, the Wilcox Primary School office staff is still in session. They're still working through the greater part of June, so please give them a call, and we look forward to meeting all of our students in the class of 2035. And then finally, congratulations to the following members of our Twinsburg High School track and field team who are headed to Columbus this weekend for the OHSAA State Track and Field Championship meet. In the boys 400 meter is Logan Doyle. In the boys 800 meter is Aiden Kane. In the boys 4x400 are Aiden Kane, Logan Doyle, Josh McCulka, and Ryan Malenga. In the girls 200 meter is Savannah Swanda. In the girls 4x100 are Bree Banash, Paris Gosha Foreman, Akira Johnson, and Savannah Swanda. In the girls 4x200 are Araya Gilmer, Paris Gosha Foreman, Savannah Swanda, and Raina Thornton. And finally, rounding it out, in the girls 4x400 are Bree Banash, Sophie Bessett, Araya Gilmer, and Sanaya Ruffin. We have a busload going down this year, and it's just so much fun to see the kids perform at that level of competition. So congratulations to Coach Bird and Coach Komet and all the assistant coaches. Of course, to our outstanding athletes. We look forward to hearing some great results coming out of Columbus, Jesse Owens Stadium at Ohio State University this coming weekend. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Powers. Next is committee reports. Do we have any committee reports?
We did have a brief follow-up to the curriculum work, just a quick Zoom, so everything is set and ready to go for the following school year.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee reports? Hearing none, move on to the administrative report where we will have a presentation by our treasurer, Mr. Ahern.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to go through the 5-year forecast. Just wanted to kind of quickly go through the 5-year forecast, hit some of the highlights. I'm not going to go through the form that's been submitted to the ODE. Everybody can read that. There's where it is. It lives on the ODE website. There's the, you go to ODE, education, Ohio Gov, topics, finance, funding, 5-year forecasts. And then you click on the 5-year forecast there for traditional schools. And then you find Twinsburg, and that's where you find where the forecast is. We have a link to that off our webpage also. Wrong way. in looking at our expenditures that, go into determining our 5-year forecast, one thing that people need to remember is our schools are service industries. We have teachers and staff to keep the buildings running and all that. 60% of the salaries, or 60% of the expenditures are for salaries, 25% for benefits. So 85% of what we spend is on people. And then the rest is purchase services, which are utilities and those kind of things, and supplies. One of the things over the years that we've had to deal with, there's a long stretch there where, we have flat revenues. This is a lot to do with the state of Ohio and how they fund schools. A lot of other piece has to do with legislation and how there's legislation that gets passed every now and again that's very detrimental to school funding prospects. You can see we're pretty flat there. There's a small bump up there where that's when Chrysler closed. They paid off their taxes, so there's like a bump there. But it's pretty flat going across there. You can see where there were new levies. It kind of goes up a little bit. New levy in 2012 kind of creeps up a little bit, then flattens out again, which is what happens with levies. And then there's that next levy in 2017. But for that 10-year period there, the revenues were really pretty flat. So we had to live within that. One of the things that we have to deal with, of course, is the House Bill 920, and then that basically when a levy's passed, it's where it stays. It doesn't increase, regardless of inflation or changes in appraised home values. So when a levy's passed on a home, it could double in home value on the market, but the taxes will stay the same. House Bill 66, which eliminated the tangible personal property and CAT tax. We've been talking about that for many, many, many years. And state funding with its cap and guarantees that they always have. One of the things here is this is the tangible personal property CAT tax reimbursement. Back in 2010, there was $7.8 million, and over that stretch of 10, 12 years, that $7.8 million is gone. Next year, it's gone. Nothing left. There's $24,000 left out of $7.8 million. The state gave us some reimbursements, but they've pulled back on that, and they're done. So we're kind of on our own. Another thing here is like the state funding models. What they do is they give us so much money to figure out how much money we should get. Well, because they come up with all these crazy scenarios. They basically call us a cap district because our funding that was in place many years ago, they're not going to give us any more. So there's a loss there of $3.2 million that we should be receiving that we don't receive because of the cap and the way schools are funded in Ohio. The fair funding model is the newest, latest funding model. The hope is that it will eliminate that cap. But the problem is those funding models that are at the state level are for 2 years, and you never know if they're going to want to invest in the dollars in the state into those funding models, especially when you hear them talking about getting rid of the sales tax in Ohio, getting rid of the income tax in Ohio, and getting rid of the CAT tax in Ohio. So if they keep getting rid of taxes, then what's left to fund the services around the state are is basically sales tax. One thing we have to remember too is this is always a balancing act. The dollars come in from the community to fund the schools, so you have to be cognizant of the needs in the community and the needs in the school, and try to figure out where that happy medium is. When you look on the ODE's website, they talk about the 5-year forecast and what's the purpose of the 5-year forecast. And the 5-year forecast came out like at the end of the 1990s, basically about the same time the DeRolf decision came out, which most people have heard of. But it was basically the idea and purpose of the forecast was to engage local board of educations and communities, the long-range planning and discussion of financial issues facing school districts. And then really basically the other two parts of this are really more focused on what the state's looking at. To serve as the school district's ability to sign a 412 certificate, the state instituted that Ohio Revised Code portion there, and then provide a method for the Department of Education and auditor of state to identify school districts with potential financial problems. So that's basically the idea of the forecast and why those were brought about. You know, and basically the idea of the forecast is, you know, on that barometer, that kind of gives you an idea. The forecasts are really more of a barometer of where we're going. You know, what's the weather outside look like? You know, is it clear? Is it, you know, are we looking for some rain? You know, is the barometer going up or down? You know, what's it indicating? It's not so much an exact science as you might hope it is, but you know, it gets close and it kind of fluctuates. There's a lot of things that aren't in control of the school district, you know, especially the funding piece. You know, so we do our best to try to, you know, see where the pressures are and then move accordingly. Here's the 5-year forecast. That's the spreadsheet problem there. There's a spreadsheet portion there. It has 3 years of actual and 5 years of forecasted. The last couple of years we've been deficit spending. We're spending more. The expenditures are higher than the revenues. That's a problem. Once you see that, we have to, you know, figure out what the course of action is on that. You know, looking back at previous forecasts, going back to May of 2019, we were forecasting that you know, that there was going to be a deficit of about $6 million this current year, when it's about $5 million. So we've been forecasting that and as we've been looking forward into the forecast. You know, one of the things also to note is down on the bottom in the very right-hand corner, there's like kind of 3 numbers going across. Actually, there's like 3 numbers going across right here. This is that renewal levy that we have, that we vote on every 5 years. So what happens is the state wants us to decrease this number by that amount and put it down here because it's not a done deal. So they put it in here, and then what happens basically is this line here is the line you need to look at as opposed to looking at any other line in the forecast. So if you were comparing this to an older forecast of like that last fall or a couple years ago, this is the line really to pay attention to down here on the bottom. There's kind of a more condensed version of that. You know, there again, the levy line moved from up on top, where you can't see it here, you know, down to there. So this number here is the number to keep an eye on. There's been many challenges over the last couple of years. You know, COVID, what a challenge is that? What a nightmare challenge that's been. The reconfiguring of the buildings, masks, PPE, sanitizing, extra staff, social distancing, and all the work that went with that. You know, the state budget cuts, we have to deal with those kind of things, unemployment. You know, when COVID first hit, the state cut our budget. For the first 2 years of that, they cut it in 20 and 21 for some budget cuts. You know, the economy, the political divisiveness, of course, 920 capping the local taxes. You know, so this is what we deal with. Since September 10th, or since September of 2010, there have been 5 school funding models. So, you know, it's just like the legislature just changes these funding models, you know, as they think like one's better than the next, and a lot of times they're just plugging in numbers and trying to make it work. Not much real goes into these funding models. House Bill 66, which eliminated the tangible personal property tax, and then that they kept changing and changing. And then casino revenue, which is like one of the latest extra dollar things that we get, generates some money. In 2020 it was $220,000, and then in 2021 it was $169,000. Went down, obviously because of COVID and the lockdowns and all that. But it should stay around $200,000 in funding in that line item. You know, the ODE, when they look at the five-year forecast. This is part of the purpose of it. You know, physical cost watch and emergency. As they look at your forecast, they're looking, you know, to make sure that you have sufficient fund balances moving forward, or if you don't have that sufficient fund balance, that you have a plan, you know, going forward on how you'll get there. This is one thing, like we know that there's a storm brewing out there. We have Twinsburg currently has a significant fund balance, but it's not going to be long till it's all gone. It goes very quickly, and it kind of like helps us get us through, but we really have to be very aware and very on top of it, because it's going to be gone. So you know, really right now we need to get it deep into the discussion about what's the plan, how do we get out of those deficit funding positions. Here's the strategic, financial strategic planning flowchart. This is something that we've been doing for many years, and this one was from October, I think October of 19. And here was we, you know, predicting, you know, 2025 is basically the year that the district is in big trouble. If we don't have a plan to work our way out of it. So, you know, we've seen it coming, we know it's coming. We just need to work through these issues. Then one of the other things that we have to work through is we have this little renewal levy. It's a nice renewal levy, but it gets renewed every 5 years. Of course, this fall or next year is the cycle to renew this. So you have to determine when that needs to be done. We want to make sure that we renew these levies, because they're part of the Homestead and Rollback Act. The state, when they passed their income tax back in the 70s, made promises that they would reduce some of the burden on the property tax owners. So there was a 10% credit that you would get on a homeowner occupied business. Well, the state basically is saying that a couple of years ago they decided they weren't going to do that anymore. They were going to take away that promise on any new levies. So the old ones still have the homestead and rollback. Any new levies do not have the homestead and rollback, which is unfortunate. There's that extra, not extra, but there's that funding piece that came from the state to actually kind of help the local property owners a little bit. And that's kind of going through the 5-year forecast. Didn't really want to get lost in the numbers. I know people's eyeballs roll up on their heads when I start talking about the numbers, but the 5-year forecast is out there. It's on the website, on the ODE website. You can definitely take a look at it. You know, if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. I do prefer emails. So I can, you know, I do better when I can look at it and think about it and do any kind of replies that way. So if you have any questions or whatever, please feel free to email me, contact me by email. I'll get back to you. But, you know, the 5-year forecast, we've been doing it for 20 years. Not much really changes. You kind of just trend out the numbers. You look at them. You take the numbers that you're given. The state gives you the state foundation numbers. The county basically gives you the real estate numbers, and that's 90% of our funding right there in state real estate, and then state funding. And then, you know, the employees, you know, the salaries, benefits, and that's 85%. So you just trend that out. You know, kind of just follow your trend lines. And that's really how that kind of 5-year forecast is done. You look for any kind of, you know, if you know something's going to change, you definitely will include that. For the most part, it's just, you know, working to get the numbers as close to what you think they can be to reality, and within reason. So, any questions?
Just a couple comments. You know, we've been seeing the trends for a long time. I think Mrs. Davis and I got on the board, it was pretty much right after the operational change plan, which is a long time ago. And we've been watching the trends. We were always criticized for carrying a fund balance. The fund balance was never more than maybe 9 months of a school year. Rainy day, when's the rainy day gonna come? Well, it sure showed up 2 years ago.
Yeah.
With COVID, but the forecast, there are no surprises with respect to where we were gonna be. Without the operational change plan, I think we're in crisis in 13. With the operational change plan and the continued observance of maintaining that plan, we just kept pushing. I remember the one graphic that you had years ago, just kept pushing those years back. Oh, we were gonna be out in 23. No, we pushed it back to 24 to 25. And I think I said this at the last forecast. The storm's coming. You know, we're not surprised. We have, like most districts, a vicious levy cycle.
Yeah.
And you know, to the voters, it may seem we're always coming out with our handout, but those are the only way we're funded. Those are operating levies, and like you said, if they were not to pass, any new money would be subject to homestead. You know, you wouldn't have that homestead rollback. So we know what the community is asking about. There's no doubt in my mind that, you know, there's a big hole that we now need to get ahead of, as we've forecasted it all along. You know, we're there till 25, but now is the time to start making the plans, dealing with the renewals that we have. They're not permanent, at least the ones that we have. There's only a couple of the permanent improvement that barely covers, you know, the maintenance of our aging buildings as it is. So, you know, we're juggling both a permanent improvement, renewal levies, you know, the need to plug that hole in the future. And we've also heard the community loud and clear with respect to what they want in buildings. But, you know, I'll say it like, just like your house, we can't be building rich and cash poor. It would be a very bad position. So that's what my colleagues and I are going to be discussing and have been discussing for a while. I think we're going to see some things in the near future that we're going to have to make some tough decisions. The community ultimately will decide what they want, and it's not the 5 of us; it's what the community says. We know that the bonds came off the high school, and maybe you saw your taxes dip down a little bit. Maybe other agencies, you know, went up, but again, you know, that's all past. We need to continue to look at these numbers. There's no surprises, there's no missing money, there's no, you know, something that we miss. It's just the nature of all the caps. You know, how many was it? 5, 6 funding models.
Yeah.
Maybe this next one will hold, maybe not, but we've been capped. You know, we've talked about TPP for many years, and it's the reality. Watch the chart, it's been going down, and that's why we've had to start eating into our fund balance, along with COVID, and the ability to run the district. And I think we did a fairly bang-up job maintaining education during that time. Not every district can say that. A lot of them went heavy into deficit and are in more crisis. So the warning shots across the bow, as we said last time we did this. Now it's time to, amongst my colleagues, figure out, you know, what that hole, how big it is, and what it's going to need to fill it.
Yeah, the only other, I agree with everything that, you know, Mr. Felber said, especially from a historical standpoint. I know that when the operational change plan was implemented, at that time, that board articulated that they would need to come back for another 5 years. So by that time,
It's been 5
I was
years,
on the
yeah.
board, we actually passed another new.
Right, they pledged they wouldn't come
Yeah, they
back,
pledged
and they
they
did,
wouldn't
and
come
they
back,
didn't.
and
But
they
then we
did.
did. In 5 years, we
Well,
had
they
to.
did.
Right.
So we're kind of back at that same point, you know, where, you know, there's a necessity to kind of take a look at, you know, new money, not necessarily, you know, knowing exactly what that is, but the fact of the matter is the trend seems to be every 4 to 5 years, you know, to help continue to push that line out. The other piece that you mentioned, Mr. Felber, is the COVID impact. And so I don't know if it's a question or a comment, Marty. I know that, you know, we brought on a lot of staff over the last couple of years, much of which we were able to use ESSER dollars to kind of offset that piece and help lessen the impact on the general fund. With this particular 5-year forecast that we see in front of us, is that represented here, or will that, or will, you know, will those numbers be shown, you know, in a later forecast?
When you get down to it, the ESSER fund, some people were paid out of ESSER fund, so that's not going to do any difference on the general fund. And then really the impact on the general fund is going to be pretty small. And you know, I mean, you know, if you or I had that money, we'd be like, wow, you know, but, you know, for a $50 million budget, you know, the ESSER dollars aren't going to make that big a difference.
The other piece, so, you know, point in case is that, you know, the community needs to know that, for one, when COVID hit, I mean, in a lot of ways, we spared no expense, especially on, you know, the supplies that we needed to get, you know, expanding, you know, the way that we did to make sure that we could stay open. But we, you know, we were able to leverage federal dollars to help us through that process. The other piece that I wanted to speak on a little bit more is fair funding model. And that particular design is to really move away from us being capped. Now, I know that that's supposed to be phased in, you know, over, I think, 5 years. So we're only a year and a half, 2 years in to that. But we're hopeful that funding model stays in place. Unfortunately, every 2 years, every biennium, you know, the legislature gets together and, you know, they like to tinker, you know, with it. So while there's some uncertainty with, you know, with regard to that, you know, I'm hopeful that that stays in place so that we can at least realize what the money that we were leaving on the table simply because of the funding model that was in place, you know, at that time, which was the cap. So uncapped, it's better for us.
Right.
But you know, we just got to stay on the ball and make sure that we continue to have them keep that funding model in place.
Yeah, and try to fully fund it.
Yeah, and fully funded. So it hasn't been fully funded, but the phase-in approach, ideally, once we get through the entire cycle, you know, will be uncapped, and that will also, you know, provide a little more relief for us.
Well, I would say, Mr. Cruz, to that point, since we've been on the top of the hill waiting for those announcements to come, and everybody's, oh, you're getting all this money, and every single time, you know, along came Lucy and pulled the football out, and, you know, you're laying on your back wondering what happened. So, you know, until we have a check in hand and that check clears the bank, we still have to operate a district, and we still have to forecast, we still have to fund, which means we only have one recourse. So people say, oh, why don't you wait for this, wait for it. You can't wait for it because they've changed it so many times. And here, you know, like you said, it's not even fully funded. It was a drop in the bucket this year. And, you know, we have a much bigger bucket. We still have many unfunded mandates and preschools and other things that come down that we have to, as a district by law, cover. So we still have to operate, and there's some, you know, some big numbers that we have to have a discussion on. You mentioned, you know, new money, so since you mentioned it, I'll mention it. I didn't say
No, I
NM,
mean,
but, you know, but that's that's going to be the reality of it.
The reality is that, you know, districts are primarily funded through property taxes. You know, which is why, you know, Mrs. Powers and I continue to fight in Columbus to get the state to pony up, you know, more so that, you know, property, you know, people who pay their property taxes don't have to continue to pay. But until that dynamic shifts, and it is beginning to shift, but we haven't seen it yet. The bottom line is, you know, this isn't, you know, this is by design, that the majority of our revenue is driven by property taxes.
And it's not about running one less bus or turning a couple lights off. With 85% of our budget being personnel, I mean, it's the education system that people have come to expect and move here for. And unfortunately, that comes, you know, with a balance to that scale. So.
And one slide that you normally put up there, Marty, that you didn't this time, is if you look at the CUP report, it does show you where we stack up in terms of
Right.
how much money we spend per pupil. And we're still one of the lowest in our region. So, you know,
Bang for your buck.
yeah, you get
So
more bang
compared
for
to
your
our
buck.
neighbors, compared to the state average.
Yeah, our
We've
students are
always
doing-
the 9 years I've been here, we've always been lower than both contiguous neighbors and the state average, meaning we're putting a pretty good education out there, you know, for the limited dollars that we have. But there's no easy answers. There's gonna be pain across the board, no doubt.
That's all I had. I don't know if my colleagues have any more comments or questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margie. Okay. So I don't believe we have any remonstrance. Just taking a wild guess. All right, so we'll move on to item H, Treasurer's Report and Recommendations. Without objection from my colleagues, I will read H1 through 5 together. H1, resolved that the Twinsburg Board of Education approves the following meeting minutes: regular meeting of May 4th, 2022, and May 18th, 2022, and the special meetings of May 5th, 2022, and May 10th, 2022, as sent to the board under separate cover. 2, that the Twinsburg Board of Education accepts the following financial reports: bank reconciliation and general fund financial summary report and financial report by fund for the month of April 2022, as sent to the board under separate cover. 3, that the Twinsburg Board of Education accepts the check register for the month of April 2022. The total, including payroll, is $5,734,449.52. 4, that the Twinsburg Board of Education, Summit County of Ohio, as statutory taxing authority for Twinsburg Public Library, alternative tax budget information and forwards the tax budget to the Summit County Budget Commission as sent to the board under separate cover. And 5, that the Twinsburg Board of Education approves the May update of the Twinsburg City School District fiscal year 2022 5-year forecast as sent to the board under separate cover. Do I have a motion for H1 through 5?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Felber. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Crawford. Any discussion?
It's always a good place for you to explain why there's a library item.
Yeah, you have to do this every year for the library. Library many years ago was established as a school district library, and basically what that meant was the Twinsburg City School District is the fiscal agent for the library at the time. Well, a lot of those rules have kind of faded and gone by the wayside. But we're still our taxing authority, so to speak, legally. So anything that has to do with taxes, if they want a new levy, that we would need to approve that. We would also need to approve their tax budget, just because of the way the old system was set up. As the library was set up as a school district library.
Thank you for that explanation. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Aho, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Felber?
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford?
Yes.
Mrs. Travis?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Curtis?
Yes. That item passes 5-0. Next is item I, action items personnel. I1, resolve that the Twinsburg Board of Education accepts the certificated licensed personnel and/or contract recommendations specified, detailed in the attached exhibit as per the dates, terms, and other applicable conditions specified pending satisfactory ORC background checks. And 2, that the Twinsburg Board of Education accepts the classified personnel and/or contract recommendations detailed in the attached exhibit as per the dates, terms, and other applicable conditions specified pending satisfactory ORC background checks. Do I have a motion for I1 and 2?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Travis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Davis. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Aho, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Travis?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Felber?
Yes.
Mr. Curtis?
Yes. That item passes 5-0. Next is action items, new business. Excuse me, items J1 through 5. Without objection from my colleagues, I will read them together. J1, resolve that the Twinsburg Board of Education accepts the donation from TD Garden Centers, 25018 Broadway Avenue, Bedford, Ohio, 44146, of 200 plants to be used for Staff Appreciation Day approximate value $1,000 per the attached exhibit. 2, that the Twinsburg Board of Education approve the student service agreement for one student to attend Re-Ed Aspire for the summer of 2022. The cost is $2,975 as sent to the board under separate cover. This is a general fund expenditure. 3, that the Twinsburg Board of Education approves the student service agreement for one student to attend Re-Ed Aspire for the 2022-23 school year at a daily rate of $202, not to exceed 183 days as sent to the board under separate cover. Total cost not to exceed $36,966. This is a general fund expenditure. 4, that the Twinsburg Board of Education approves the student service agreement for one student to attend Re-Ed Access for the 2022-23 school year at a daily rate of $295, not to exceed 183 days, as sent to the board under separate cover. Total cost not to exceed $53,985. This is a general fund expenditure. And 5, that the Twinsburg Board of Education approves the federal Juneteenth holiday, June 2022, as a paid holiday for 11 and 12-month employees, as well as for employees contracted to work on June 20th, 2022. For the 2022 calendar year, this federal holiday will fall on Monday, June 20th, 2022. Do I have a motion for J1 through 5?
Mr. Curtis, you missed the addended number 6.
Excuse me?
You missed the addended resolution number 6.
I'm going to do that next. Yeah. So moved by Mrs. Crawford. Second? Second by Mrs. Davis. Just thank Petite Garden for the donation for the flowers. That was really nice of them. I appreciate any and all donations to assist us in what we do, and also the Juneteenth holiday recognition. Pretty special. I'm sure our employees will enjoy that as well. Any other comments or questions? All right. Mr. Aho, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Crawford,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Felber,
Yes.
Mrs. Travis,
Yes.
Mr. Curtis.
Yes. That item passes 5-0. Next is the addended item, which is J6. We're gonna add this for J6, and we're gonna renumber the rest of them. So the other ones underneath will be 7, 8, and 9. So J6, resolved that the Twinsburg Board of Education authorizes the memorandum of understanding with the Twinsburg Education Association regarding the employment of long-term substitute teachers to serve in the role of quarantine support bridge to success teachers or bridge to success teachers for 22-23 school year. These long-term substitute teachers will be compensated with ESSER funding as sent to the board under separate cover. Do I have a motion for J6?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Travis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Felber. Any discussion? No, I'm just gonna do this second, and then we'll do the other ones, 7, 8, and 9 as well. Any other questions? Mr. Aho, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Travis,
Yes.
Mr. Felber,
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Curtis.
Yes, and that item passes 5-0. Now, J7, 8, and 9, without objection from my colleagues, I will read them together. J7, resolved that the Twinsburg Board of Education approves the agreement with the Education Service Center of Northeast Ohio for one student to attend PEP Prentice Autism Center for the 22-23 school year as sent to the board under separate cover. The cost is $456 for 190 days. Total tuition cost is $86,640. This is a general fund expenditure. 8, that the Twinsburg Board of Education approves the agreement with the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio for one student to attend Greenview DTC for the 22-23 school year as sent to the board under separate cover. The cost per day is $264 for 190 days. Total tuition is $50,160. This is a general fund account expenditure. And 9, that the Twinsburg Board of Education approves the agreement with the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio for one student to attend Greenville DTC for the 22-23 school year as sent to the board under separate cover. The cost per day is $274 for 190 days. Total tuition is $52,060. This is a general fund account expenditure. Do I have a motion for J7 through 9? So moved by Mrs. Crawford. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Davis. Any discussion?
Yes. Mr. Curtis, to be transparent, I do work for the ESC of Northeast Ohio, and although I have no affiliation with any of the organizations that we are agreeing with or making arrangements with, I do not get any financial benefit from anything that the board is doing on this resolution, but to avoid any appearance of impropriety, I will abstain tonight from the vote on this particular section.
Thank you, Mrs. Travis. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Aho, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Crawford,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Felber,
Yes.
Mrs. Travis,
Abstain.
Mr. Curtis,
Yes. Passes 4 with 1 abstention. Okay, J10. Resolved that the Twinsburg Board of Education approves the proposal from Mid-Ohio Asphalt and Concrete, 2926 Tucker Court, Twinsburg, Ohio, 44087, in the amount of $48,880 for the paving project at the Twinsburg High School student lot pursuant to the terms and conditions set forth in the proposal as sent to the board under separate cover. This is a permanent improvement expenditure. Do I have a motion for J10?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Davis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Felber. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Aho, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Felber,
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford,
Yes.
Mrs. Travis,
Yes.
Mr. Curtis,
Yes. Passes 5-0. Next is miscellaneous. Do you have anything for miscellaneous?
Yes, I just wanted to recognize last week on May 24th, the Wilcox put on the, for the first time, it was their bike program, and that was given by the gym teachers, Mr. Sanders and Ms. Wilson, as well as Mr. Fantone helped, Ryan and Bob helped try to get the stadium together for it. They had over 230 Wilcox students attend that event. This has to do with their new bike program that they started this year, and I think it was the Twinsburg Rotary Club and some other community members, the fire station, who helped donate 6 bikes for that event. So it turned out really great, and thanks to everyone to make that a great event. Hopefully it can be done on a yearly basis. And then just want to thank all the staff for the school year. Last week, you ended with like field day, and they had graduation, the 6th grade clap out, all the different events that took place. So wanted to thank the staff for everything they continue to do to make these events happen for the students and the parents.
That was pretty cute. I saw pictures of the kids riding out of the Tiger, so that was good. Also, thanks for our safety forces for additional attention, as well as the Twinsburg CERT team for their assistance this past week.
And then, just to say ditto what Ronnie said to the staff, always, this time of the year, especially appreciate the long, hard hours they put in, and definitely well-deserved summer break. And I know that there was a lot of staff and administrators who helped make graduation happen, and I know they were thanked on graduation night, but it's just, I know some of you have done this a few times, it's always pretty much our favorite thing to do over the year. I really look forward to seeing the kids on stage and the family celebrate, definitely wouldn't miss it, but it was a great, it was just a great event to be back there and celebrate with the students, and you can just feel the excitement in the kids and the family, and just, it was really a highlight of the year.
And so we'll bring up the rear here with all the dittos, the baccalaureate and Father Michael and the other ministers who came. It was a really beautiful service that night for our students who were able to attend. Graduation was absolutely awesome as a first experience as a new board member. That will be a memorable event each year. And I also just want to thank everyone and add to that thank you. Be sure to have a safe summer. If you're traveling, be safe. And if you're not, enjoy every minute of it, because August will roll around really fast. So enjoy your summer.
Okay. So, do have a need to go into executive session. So we'll go into executive session at 7:52 to discuss employment and compensation of public employees as per Board of Education Policy 0166A, and to review negotiations with public employees concerning their compensation and other conditions of employment as per Board of Education Policy 0166E. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Davis. I'll give the second to Mrs. Crawford. Mr. Aho, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford,
Yes.
Mr. Felber,
Yes.
Mrs. Travis,
Yes.
Mr. Curtis.
Yes. Okay, we are now in executive session. I do not anticipate that we will conduct further business once we reconvene. Thank you.